Welcome back to Clash of Cultures. Today we're going to be previewing the Tennessee versus Alabama game. Big matchup implications for the SEC. Obviously, Tennessee on one side of the conference and Alabama on the other. But nonetheless, it is an SEC game. It's an in-conference game. So one of these teams are going to get another loss and could arguably knock them out of the chance to get to the SEC title game. So it's going to be a kind of a good one to preview. Dad, who is your favorite in this game, or what is some storylines that you have going into this game?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think both teams are kind of underwhelming from where we probably would have said they were at the beginning of the season. Obviously, both already have a loss, but I think we just haven't seen it click like how I thought it would for Milroe or Milton. And I think we both had them at least as fringe Heisman names, guys' names
I definitely did.
In that Heisman conversation. And I don't think we've seen that. However, what I will say is I think Milroe has seemed to show a trajectory heading in the positive. And I'm not saying Milton has seemed to just kind of been kind of ho-hum. And we haven't seen much production in terms of numbers. I mean, you're talking about just 10 touchdowns in 6 games, 4 interceptions, 1,200 yards, so a little bit over 200 yards a game. We haven't seen much. Now, obviously, we know Milroe set a game. So when I take that out, they've played, and I'm sorry, I said in 6 games, but Tennessee's played 6. Milroe's played 7. Alabama's played 7 games. They are 6-1, but his numbers haven't looked great either.
Milroe did sit a game. He did sit a game, by the way.
Yeah. That's what I said.
Okay.
But so he's played 6, but Alabama has played 7. His numbers have not looked great. However, he has looked better in the last couple of weeks. I think Alabama has kind of figured out how to use him. So with how bad Tennessee looked in that Florida game, and with the fact that Alabama has figured out that their strategy to being successful this season is going to be to play to Milroe's strengths and then play to their team strengths, which is a strong defense. So with that, I think Alabama is trending to the positive. So I have to just slightly, especially with the fact that this game is in Alabama, just slightly favor Alabama. What about you?
So I like this game a lot. I think this is going to be the best game of this week. I know we have the Ohio State-Penn State game, but I have this one circled because I think in this game, we're obviously going to find out what team is going to be, 6-1 or 7-1. But I think in the case that Alabama wins convincingly, then I don't think that Texas loss looks as bad as everybody makes it, because then you still have wins over Tennessee now, who's a top 25 team. They may not be top 25 at this game if they lose. They have wins over Ole Miss. They still have the win over Mississippi State. So I think they have a lot of good wins, and you still play LSU. So obviously either of these teams still control their own destiny when it comes to SEC title and playoff berths. But I'm going to say this. I think Tennessee is going to win this game. And the reason why, and again, I've been very high on Alabama and Nick Saban all year. I picked them over Texas. I picked them in every single game we've previewed. But I know I've also been down on Tennessee ever since we've seen them play in week 2. But looking at the numbers, because numbers don't lie. At the end of the day, if you look at the numbers, Tennessee has, if you're talking about yards per game, they're averaging almost 80 yards more than them a game. And both of these defenses are not that great. I know we think Alabama's defense is amazing. Alabama's giving up 300 yards of offense or 300 yards, on the defense side of the ball, and Tennessee's giving up 300 yards. So it's pretty comparable. But I will say this: the only thing I will couple that with is Alabama has played Texas. Tennessee hasn't played anybody of that level.
I think when you say that, you remember, they've played not only Texas, but they played some teams that I think have pretty good offenses. I know Arkansas isn't great, but Arkansas has some players. They play Ole Miss, who is an offensive team. And really where I think we get the notion that Alabama has a great defense is how that defense looked in that Ole Miss game, where they really shut them down. And then, like you said, the Texas game. I don't think Tennessee has played anybody to that caliber yet.
I agree with that. And I also think, so the over-under is at 47, like we talked about in yesterday's video with Ohio State, Penn State. I would take the over on that one. That doesn't make any sense to me. Both teams are giving up 300 yards of offense. I know Milton and Milroe have both looked shaky, but I just think 47 points is kind of ridiculous, especially because I feel like, at least on Alabama's end, I feel like Alabama could score 14 points in 2 minutes with how explosive they look with Jermaine Burton. But on the
Yes.
other side, I think Tennessee's running game is going to be a big factor in this game. They have three solid running backs. I think
Yeah.
they have a guy with 500 yards, like almost 400 and 300 yards. So I think those three guys are going to be key in kind of controlling the pace of play. The line is at 8.5. I know we talked about on the live show that I wouldn't take Tennessee with that. I probably would. Um, if I was betting on this game, I'd probably take Tennessee to cover that. Just because as I'm looking at the actual numbers, nothing shows me that Tennessee can't compete with this team. I know last year they beat them, but it was a completely different team. So I'm not even
Yeah,
saying it because of
absolutely. It's
last year.
completely different. Yeah.
But even when we look at this year, just strictly based off the numbers, Alabama averages 7 more passing yards in them a game. Tennessee averages nearly 100 more rushing yards a game than Alabama, which is completely surprising to me
Yeah.
because Tennessee was not a run team last year, and Alabama, I know as of late they haven't been a run team, but Alabama is still known to be able to run the ball effectively. So
Mhm.
Tennessee averages almost 100 yards more on the ground. They average 10 more yards given up passing, Tennessee that is, and they both average 105 rushing yards given up. Exactly the same. Alabama averages like 3 inches more given up. But
That's crazy.
it's literally, I think this game is going to come down to which one of these inexperienced quarterbacks throws the most interceptions. That's what it's going to come down
Yeah.
to. And Milroe, throughout this year in the big games, has shown to telegraph his passes and throw directly to the defenders.
Yeah.
I haven't watched too many Tennessee games because they haven't really had any big games like Alabama had with Texas or Ole Miss. So I think this is going to be the first game where I sit and watch an entire Tennessee game. I watched like 3/4 of the Florida one, but they kind of got ran out the gym in that game, so I stopped watching. So this is going to be the first game where Milton kind of can show like, hey, I can replace Hooker, win these big time games. And if Tennessee happens to win this game, that would solidify themselves as a top 12 to 13 team with still a matchup with Georgia on the rise. And if they win that game, they're the winners of that division, and they have a chance
Yeah.
to win the SEC. And I think
Now
everybody
you're
kind of
talking about, I mean, and that's no small task to beat both
no,
Alabama and Georgia. Yeah.
it's not. But I'm just saying each of these teams control their own destiny. That's my only
Agreed.
argument. And I think nobody wrote Alabama off when they lost to Texas. But I think when Tennessee lost to Florida, it was like the bus is on fire. We're going to write them off now. And I
Yeah,
think
but I also would say that I think people have a better perception of Texas than they do Florida. Right? Florida is a
I
downtown.
agree with that. But I just think in the SEC because it's so it's the SEC is the best conference in college football. I know not Pac-12 is the champ this year so
No,
far.
I mean,
But historically, there's so many good teams in the SEC. You can lose a game, win out, and still have the toughest resume and the best strength of schedule in the entire country. So I think if Tennessee is able to beat Alabama and Georgia, they're a top 4 team at the end of the year.
yeah. If Tennessee beats Alabama, Georgia, and wins the SEC championship, they are in the playoffs. They are
Yes.
absolutely in the playoffs.
So I'm definitely excited for this game. I think, like I said, it's going to come down to which of these inexperienced quarterbacks can manage the game the best. I know Milroe's way more athletic than Milton is, so he's able to kind of make up for some of those deficiencies passing with his running game. Milton is not like that. I mean, he has a little bit of mobility, but he's not Milroe. So they're going to have to rely a lot on the ground game. When you look at their passing numbers, they both played 6 games. Their passing numbers are pretty much identical. 1,200 yards from
Yeah,
Milton,
no, you're
1,300 from Milroe. Both threw 4 interceptions. Obviously, I'm sure Milroe has some rushing touchdowns, and Milton might have 1 or 2, whatever the case may be. But pretty much identical when we're talking about the numbers. And then again, even defensively, team stats, they're pretty much identical. So I think this game is going to be very good. Alabama fans probably think they're going to kill Tennessee. Would I be surprised if Alabama won by 21? No, because Tennessee didn't look good against Florida. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Tennessee won the game.
I mean, if you told me a team won by 21, I would think it's Alabama. I'm not gonna lie, I'm very shocked to hear the Alabama defensive numbers. That's kind of crazy to me. Like I said, I kind of had them as a top 3-4 defense in college football this year. So it's kind of surprising to hear those numbers. I think, yeah, Tennessee has to feel good. My concern is twofold. One, the game is in Alabama. And I think that helps Milroe a little bit because now you're not playing against the crazy fanatical crowd, and that probably hurts Milton because you are playing against a crazy fanatical crowd.
But
Um,
but that didn't help Milroe against Texas. So
No, no, I agree.
that's like, so I don't know how much that's actually going to help. I'm a quarterback like that.
And then my second thing is just simply that there's a measure of revenge. I am sure Nick Saban and players on that Alabama team that were there that last year want to some get back for the fact that Tennessee was able to knock them off last year. Again, I don't know how much that factors into two teams playing, because I'm sure Tennessee wants to beat Alabama again, just to say we beat Alabama twice. So we'll see. Should be a heck of a game.
And also, I didn't really kind of think about this storyline, but both these teams have one loss. We've
Yeah.
never seen a 2-loss team in the playoffs. So essentially, this game is for the season. And
Yeah,
when
I
you're
agree.
talking about, especially when you're talking about Alabama, because Tennessee has yet to make a playoff. So if they
So it
lose,
would be
it's kind of,
shocking.
yeah, it's not like crazy. But if Alabama loses, your playoff hopes are done. You would literally need to win every game 50-0 if you wanted to be the first two-loss team to get in the
Yeah.
playoffs, and I don't think that would happen. So we'll see. But I mean, this game is going to be good. Like I said, we did the Penn State
Well,
Ohio
let me
State
say
one, but
this though. Let me say this. Now, obviously, it's tough for a two-loss team to get in, but Alabama, whose other loss is out of conference, right? So their one other loss, they could still win the West, right? If they beat LSU, they win the rest of their games, which means they could still go to the SEC championship, assuming they play in the SEC championship, a number one Georgia team that's also undefeated. Let's just say. And now they're 10-2. I don't A 10-2 team, especially Alabama, right? Who's a media darling that beats Georgia on a neutral field, might be the one team that has a real case to make the playoffs. Not saying it's going to happen, but I would say yes, it'd be very close to over. I wouldn't yet close the door completely though.
the only reason why I would say it wouldn't work is because, do you think if Georgia was 12-0 and lost to a 10-2 team in the SEC title game, they put a 10-2
Ooh,
team
yeah, good
over
point.
that Georgia team?
Good point.
That's
That'd be tough.
because I know Kansas State was 10-3 or 10-2, or if they were 10-3, no, they were 10-2. Yeah, 10-2 heading into that game
Yeah,
as well. And then they beat
yeah,
they
that's a
beat
valid that's
TCU,
a
and
valid
they
point.
didn't get in over TCU. So I just, again, the Big 12 is not the same thing as the SEC. So it's comparing apples to oranges. But I just think if Georgia was undefeated at number 1 and lost to, let's say, a number 7 in the SEC title game, I think they would only move back to like number 4.
Yeah, no, that's a
Because
valid point.
I don't think that they would jump the one loss team. It's kind of like I said, the TCU situation last year where they lost and still got in. But again, who knows? But I don't think if you can't beat Tennessee, I don't think you're going to be able to beat LSU and Georgia. The door, I guess, would still be slightly cracked open, but I don't know. But I'll give my final pick, obviously, this Friday during the live show. I am favoring Tennessee right now, though, just because the defensive numbers, and I think Milroe has been a little bit more shaky than Milton has this year. Again, he has played against some tougher opposition, but I don't know. Something about me tells me that Tennessee might get this game. And I've been a
I wouldn't be
fan.
shocked.
I wouldn't say a fan. I've been a supporter of Alabama this year, as far as the doubters saying stuff about Nick Saban and stuff. So it'll be a good one for sure. But we have the live show coming this Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. We look forward to seeing you guys there. We also have a video dropping tomorrow. We're gonna be talking about college football storylines. So make sure you guys stick around for that. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.